All right, so today we're going to be looking at this research paper that you sent in
Okay.
about how different types of media can actually influence
Huh.
like our buying decisions.
Hmm.
And I gotta say, when I first read this thing, I was kind of blown away.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating area,
Yeah.
especially today when we're
Oh,
just
yeah.
bombarded with ads everywhere we look.
It's crazy. I mean, we're talking TV,
Hmm.
we're talking desktop, web, mobile web radio magazine, like
Right? Yeah.
the whole shebang. And the researchers here wanted to figure out,
Hmm.
okay, how much are we using each of these? How do we feel about each of these? And then does how we feel about those different
Right.
media actually like make us more likely to spend money?
Yeah, are we more susceptible to
hmm
advertising on one platform versus another?
And get this, so they found that mobile is like not just the most used,
Right.
but it's actually considered the most owned.
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting
Yeah.
finding too.
It's a little freaky
Yeah.
when you think about it, like how much we depend.
On these little devices.
Well, and it's like an extension of ourselves now.
It is. I mean, like if I lose my phone for even a minute, I like totally freak out.
Oh, absolutely.
But okay, so how do they even like measure that
Oh,
feeling connected to a certain channel?
Well, they used a combination of surveys and experiments
Okay.
to gauge things like how familiar people were with different platforms, how much they identify with them,
Right.
even how concrete or abstract they perceive those different media sources to be.
Interesting.
And what they found is that those feelings were surprisingly strong predictors of whether someone would buy something
Wow.
after seeing an ad.
So it's not just about the ad itself, it's more about
Yeah.
where you see it.
It's about the context
Okay.
where you're encountering that ad.
That's really interesting.
And in fact, they found no significant difference in buying intent between TV ads and web ads overall.
Huh.
What really seemed to influence people was how much they identified with that specific platform. That's wild. So it's like almost like that platform itself lends credibility to the ad.
Right, it's like a halo effect.
Totally. Okay, so it's not just about
Yeah.
having that catchy jingle anymore. You have to find the right platform where your audience is already like hanging out.
Find your people
Yeah,
and speak to them where they are.
exactly. And like where they feel comfortable and engaged.
Right, exactly. Think about it. If you're scrolling through your favorite social media feed
Yeah.
and you see an ad that really aligns with your interests
Mm-hmm.
and it's presented in a way that just feels natural on that platform, you're much more likely to be receptive to it
For sure.
than if you just see some random banner ad on a website you've never been to before.
That's so true. It's all about that
Yeah.
context and that relevance.
Yes, exactly.
But okay, so we've been talking a lot about like mobile and web.
Sure.
But what about those more like old school mediums?
Right.
Like radio or magazine?
Yeah, the good old days.
I mean, are they just like dead in the water?
well, they definitely face challenges in terms of just the sheer number of people that they reach.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still a segment of the population that really connects with
Yeah.
those traditional media.
Okay, interesting.
For example,
Mhm.
some people, they listen to the radio every day during their commute.
Yeah.
Or they have that magazine subscription that they've had for years, and they read it every month.
Right.
And so they build up this familiarity. They build up this sense of comfort and routine.
Right.
And that can actually make advertising on those platforms surprisingly effective.
Yeah, so even though they might not be reaching as many people as they used to, they still have like a very captive audience.
They do. They have that loyal audience. And I think the key is
Yeah.
for advertisers is to really understand who those people are.
Right.
What are their demographics? What are their psychographics? What are their interests? What are their values?
It's making me think about like my own media habits.
Yeah.
Like I listen to podcasts religiously when I'm working out. Does that mean that I'm more susceptible to those ads?
Well, the research suggests that any media that we consume regularly, especially if it's tied to a specific activity or a routine,
Okay.
can become a powerful channel for influencing our decisions.
Wow.
And it goes beyond just the ads themselves, too.
What do you mean?
Well, think about how a magazine might position an ad next to a certain article,
Oh.
or how a radio station might choose advertisers that align with their listeners' musical tastes.
Right.
It's all about creating a more targeted and impactful message by tapping into that existing context.
So it's not just about like blasting the same ad everywhere. It's about
Yes, sir.
finding those niche audiences.
It's about being strategic
and figuring out how to speak to them
Exactly.
in a way that resonates with them.
Exactly.
That's really interesting. This is making me rethink like my whole approach to advertising.
Well, that's what we like to do here on the deep dive, right?
Totally.
Challenge assumptions and really get people thinking about these things.
For sure, for sure.
Because media is so powerful and it shapes our perceptions. It shapes our behaviors.
Absolutely. All right, so we've talked about how our feelings about these different types of media can actually influence our buying decisions.
Yes.
And that finding the right platform for your message is crucial.
It's so important.
But how do things like trust and credibility actually factor into all this?
That's a great question. And that's actually something that the study addresses directly.
Oh, yeah.
So let's explore that a little bit further.
Awesome.
So we were talking about trust and credibility, right? And how that plays into this whole thing.
Yeah, like, does it even matter?
Well, the study found that there's a direct link between how much we identify with a certain media channel and how much we actually trust the ads that we see there.
So, like, if I'm a big fan of a certain magazine,
right,
I'm more likely to trust the ad.
Exactly. It's almost like
than that magazine.
Those positive feelings that you have about the magazine transfer over to the ads.
That's so interesting.
And, you know, we tend to trust recommendations from sources we already like.
Yeah.
Whether it's a friend, a family member, or even a media outlet.
Totally. Like if I see an ad on some random website I've never even heard of,
right,
I'm immediately like skeptical.
You're going to be suspicious.
Yeah, but if I see that same ad on a website that I visit all the time and I really trust,
right,
I'm way more likely to be like, oh, okay, maybe.
Exactly. Because you have that pre-existing relationship with that platform.
Right.
They've already built up a certain level of credibility in your mind.
For sure.
And that extends to the messages they're delivering.
It's like they've earned.
Including advertising.
Yeah, they've earned that trust.
Exactly.
This makes me think about those influencer marketing campaigns.
Yes.
Where brands are partnering with people who have these huge followings on social media.
It's all about leveraging that trust and credibility that those influencers have built with their audience.
Like when an influencer recommends something, their followers are much more likely to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'll check that out.
It feels more authentic. It feels more genuine. It doesn't feel like a paid advertisement.
Yeah, it feels like a genuine endorsement.
Exactly.
Okay, so it seems like trust is a really, really big deal.
It's huge.
When it comes to advertising.
Absolutely.
Are there any like specific strategies though?
Yeah.
That brands can use to build trust?
Well, one of the most important things is to just be transparent and authentic.
So no more like hiding behind vague claims.
No more smoke and mirrors.
And misleading language.
Right. People can spot a phony a mile away.
Totally.
So you got to be genuine. You got to be upfront about your intentions.
So basically just be real.
Be real. Be yourself.
Keep it 100.
Exactly. Because consumers are savvier than ever these days.
Oh, yeah?
And they're going to demand that transparency.
That's true.
Another important strategy is to just focus on creating really valuable content. That's relevant to your target audience.
Yeah. So instead of just like constantly hitting people with sales pitches, you're saying it's more effective to give them something useful.
Give them something of value.
Interesting.
Whether it's information or entertainment. Something that they're actually going to want to engage with.
So build that relationship first.
Exactly.
And then trust will follow.
When you consistently deliver value, you build trust and credibility.
That makes sense.
And people start to see you as a source of information or entertainment.
Right.
It's not just a company that's trying to sell them something.
Gotcha. Okay, so transparency, authenticity.
Yes.
Delivering value. These are key for brands.
Those are the big ones.
But I'm curious, this study focused on kind of broad categories of media.
Sure.
Does it look at any specific platforms within those categories?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's something that they actually acknowledge as an area for future research. You know, they point out that even within the same category, those individual platforms can have really different user demographics, different psychographics, different cultural associations.
So basically like a one-size-fits-all approach to advertising.
It doesn't work anymore.
Just doesn't work.
You really have to understand the nuances of each platform.
Tailor your message.
And tailor your approach.
That makes sense.
And that's where it gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Because a brand might find that a certain approach works really well on TikTok.
Okay.
But that same approach might totally fall flat on LinkedIn.
That's so true.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think about all the different factors that play into this. Like, are we more likely to trust an ad from a brand that we already follow on Instagram?
Right.
Are we more susceptible to ads that kind of blend seamlessly into the platform's interface?
Great questions.
Yeah.
And it highlights the need for more research in this area.
For sure.
Because the media landscape is constantly evolving.
Always change.
New platforms are emerging.
Yeah.
Existing platforms are adapting.
Yeah.
It's like a never-ending game of cat and mouse.
It really is.
But I think it's really about finding that sweet spot.
Okay.
Where brands can effectively connect with their audience without feeling intrusive or inauthentic.
Right.
And a big part of that is understanding those psychological factors that we've been talking about.
This has been so eye-opening. I feel like I have a whole new perspective.
Good, I'm glad.
On how media shapes our perceptions and how it influences our decisions.
That's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Get people thinking about these things.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We talked about how our feelings about different media can influence our buying decisions.
Yes.
The importance of finding the right platform for your message.
Yes.
And the crucial role of trust.
Absolutely.
In effective advertising.
So important.
But what does all this mean for us as individuals? I mean, we're bombarded with ads.
Every single day.
Every single day. How do we make sense of all of this?
That's a great question, and that's a perfect place to pick up after a quick break. So we've been talking about how all this stuff works in theory.
Yeah.
But let's think about it on a more personal level, for you and me and everyone listening.
Okay, so how do we actually use this information?
Right. Like, what can we do with all of this?
Yeah.
I think a good place to start is just becoming more aware of our own media habits.
Okay.
Like, really paying attention to how much time we're spending on different platforms, what kinds of ads we're clicking on,
right,
and maybe even asking ourselves, why am I drawn to this particular platform?
Okay, yeah.
Why did that ad catch my attention?
That's a good point. I never really thought about it like that.
Right. Once you start to see those patterns, you can be a more intentional consumer.
That makes sense. I guess I never really thought about myself as being influenced by ads.
Oh, we all are to some extent, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true.
This is human nature.
It's not like we can just avoid advertising altogether, though.
No, of course not. It's everywhere.
So what's the solution then?
I think it's about being a smart consumer.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those moments where we might be influenced and really asking ourselves some critical questions.
Well, what?
Like, do I actually need this?
Okay.
Am I being swayed by some clever marketing trick?
Right.
Or is this something that I genuinely value and want in my life?
That's a really good point. It's we need to develop this filter for all those messages.
Yeah, exactly like a BS detector.
Totally.
Because we're bombarded with so much information these days.
Oh, yeah.
It's really important to be able to sift through it all and focus on what matters.
This has been a really interesting conversation. I feel like I have a lot to think about now.
That's what we hope for.
Yeah.
On the deep dive, to give you some food for thought.
Well, you've definitely succeeded.
It's about sparking curiosity.
Yeah.
And helping people understand the world around them a little bit better.
Totally. And how we interact with that world.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, the more we understand about how things work, the better equipped we are to make informed decisions.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great place to wrap things up. So to everyone listening out there, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into those topics that fascinate you.
You never know what you might discover.
Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We'll see you next time.